Our presenter this evening is Carlo Stasi, who is a OU MBA alumni and a member of the OUBS Alumni Council. Carlo is a corporate communication and branding strategist currently working for the European Commission. He lives and works in Luxembourg, and I will now hand over to Carlo, who will tell you a bit more about his background. Over to you, Carlo.
Thank you very much, Janet, and hello everybody. I like to define myself as a communication manager, although there is a strong project management component in what communication management do. And in the next few minutes I will try to show you how good communication managers practice communication, and excellent communication managers try to practice a lot of other things as well, with a really cross-boundary approach, or a holistic approach, if you wish. Janet, I'd like to ask you if you can hear me.
I can hear you fine, thank you, Carlo. Yes, you're loud and clear.
Great, that's great news. So tonight I'd like to propose you a possible way, one of the many possible roadmaps to set up your corporate communication strategy. And the approach I chose for you, which worked very well for me both in the private and in the public sector, is based upon one of the classic frameworks of quality management. This is the Parasumaran model, the quality gaps model. Of course, I adapted this model to the needs of a communication manager, and again, this is just one of the possible ways to shape your communication strategy. You can use part of what I'm going to tell you, but it is very likely that you will have to adapt bits of what I will present tonight for your particular context. I find it easy to use this quality gap model because it helps me to remember all the possible traps that I can face when crafting a corporate communication strategy. We will go through these gaps. I will show you a toolbox, I call it, for each of those. And then, starting from that, I will give you concrete examples on how I built in the past corporate communication strategy. I'd like to start with, of course, the first gap. For those who are already familiar with that, you will notice how this is now adapted to the needs of a communication manager. The first gap is between the management perception of what matters to the audience and what really matters to them. We shouldn't assume that what top management think that it is relevant to the target audience. It really is. For example, at Iveco, a great deal of communication was about environment and how environmentally friendly our vehicles were, and and how we were ahead of competitors in terms of respect for the environment. But then we discovered that this is not value added to the target audience. We are talking about logistic firms. People who work hard 360 days per year, and they make their profit only during the final 10 days, once they pay taxes and fixed costs and variable costs and so forth. So we were talking about something they didn't really care about, because environmental compliance is a legal obligation, first of all, so it's not something that make the company different from competitors, and it makes vehicles more expensive, and because per se doesn't make the firm the transport firm most profitable. So Iveco was wasting a lot of communication effort just because managers thought that being environmentally friendly was a great thing. So the point is how to close this gap. And again, this is just one of the models you can use to close this gap. And I like to think of the learning organization, and we here adopt the double feedback loop, where we not only assess whether or not our communication plan is appropriate with regard to the content and the goals, but we also try to measure the achievement. We try to understand whether or not the very indicators we are using to assess whether or not we are good in our communication are appropriate to understand if we are communicating what really matters to the audience. So not only trying to understand if the communication plan is good, but even if our way of measuring our effort is appropriate. And now this is the toolbox for this gap, for gap number 1. On the left-hand side of my slide here, I suggest 3 possible ways, and this is what we did in Iveco. We, of course, benchmarked against competitors, because other organizations can be doing better than us, or perhaps we can steal something from what they do. We can buy industry-wide studies, or we can pay for targeted market research. But whatever we choose to do, we should just concentrate on what we can really get information about, and try to also have this analysis of the external environment. This is another model here we can use. We can see if sociological, technical, environmental, political, or even ethical change in the external environment affects the way target audience will receive our communication, and perhaps more to the point, what matters to them. And the other thing, of course, we don't waste energy in trying to change what we cannot control. We try to control what we can control. But the first step to do this is to understand what the key factors that we can control and the key factors that we cannot control. If we can control them, then we can try to influence our audience, and I will be back on this point in a moment. If we cannot control them, well, then we have to be a learning organization. We have to learn, we have to change our way of communicating, our content, and our way of measuring our success. I see that there are, I read that there are audio, okay, and I see that...
Carlo, I can hear you fine, but I don't know if you maybe have an audio bar that you can maybe try turning up a little bit. I do apologise if people are having trouble. It does seem to depend on sometimes even the broadband connection you're on. So yes, some people can hear, so I apologise to those who can't. Anyway, if you'd like to carry on, Carlo. So.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
I've set my volume maximum, so hopefully it will get better now.
Lovely, thank you.
The second, so I just suggest one possible way of closing the first gap, but already being aware that there is a possibility that this gap exists is already something. Then everyone can find a possible solution in context. The second gap is between management perception of what matters to the target audience and the communication features. So this arises when the communication plan is poor, In other words, it is not detailed enough to show clearly what the communication has to deliver in terms of content and how. So when this happens, each department and in extreme cases even each employee tries his best to say the right thing. And the result is that the company is sending out mixed signals. So here the point is, and to apply this. I suggest to apply this model of the sender, message, channel, receiver. Now, the problem with this model is that when we say something, when we convey a message, we assume that the parameters that matter do not have anything to do with the particular circumstances of particular people in a specific context that make sense of what we say. But for me, the reality is that different people who make sense of their experience in different ways can be considerably different with regard to what they see as significant. And of course, culture can influence the way communication is received locally, and it involves assumptions about the range of knowledge, belief, and attitudes we will encounter in those with whom we communicate. So, does the thing that moves, which is the signal, have an intrinsic meaning? This model is very simple. There is a sender, there is a message, the message is conveyed through a channel, and there is a receiver, and the meaning gets through. Very simple, right? But perhaps also wrong. And I want to give you an example. Now, if I try to understand the meaning of this message, unless I know Bulgarian, I will not be able to understand what it's all about. Maybe it's my microphone, so hopefully now it will be better. All of a sudden, if I see the same thing using a different way of looking at it, all of a sudden it becomes clearer. It's the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So it should be enough to say that the meaning of the message is not in the message itself. Okay, that was easy. Okay, it was even unfair, perhaps, because I was using an alphabet that most of us perhaps don't understand. Okay, so I give you another example, and now you will make sense of sentences, although unless you have a very specific knowledge of the specific domain, you will not make sense of what it's all about. If you try and read this, it's English, it's plain English, and unless you have an understanding of this specific branch of the science, you will not make sense of this. And I give you yet another example, and why I am insisting so much in this, because it is all too common. This happens every day. We speak to people, we speak with people, and the message does not get through. Now I'll give you another example. You will make sense of sentences, you will make perfect sense of words. Still, I seriously doubt that just reading this, you will be able to dance cha-cha-cha basic steps. You will need 6 months before you dance a decent cha-cha-cha basic step. So the thing is, the model assumes, and this is what I said before, that the parameters that matter do not have anything to do with the person. But are we safely assuming here? I don't think so. We should try to always assess the effectiveness of our communication in context. And the toolbox here I propose is made of three components. I quote here a very much quoted statement of a senior manager of Hewlett-Packard. She said, "If only we knew what we know as an organization." There is existing information, there is knowledge in the organization, but we don't know where it is, we don't know that it's there. So the challenge here is to turn this existing but hidden information into knowledge. Think of just having a chat at the coffee machine with people. When I worked as head of communication content in Iveco, talking with dealers, engineers, workers in the production plant, gave me a great deal of information, and I could then convert it into something that I could use to shape the content of my communication plan. And I will be back to this in 2 minutes. You can choose to establish company think tanks that must be, I suggest at least, these think tanks to be cross-boundary among the various departments of the company. Or you can also have focus group, but including, please, a sample of your target audience. This is to avoid what is called also groupthink, in the sense that we like what we are, how we are, and we do not necessarily like what customers, for example, could tell us. They could say something we don't like to hear. And this is, we have to be brave. We have to accept to have these stakeholders on board and listen to them. And on the right-hand side of my slide, it's just a reminder that once you have this hidden information and you integrate it with communication planning, and sorry for the triple N there, just I spotted, then you can come out with meaningful messages. I will show you concrete examples in a moment. The third gap in terms of quality of communication is between the communication planning or the specifications and the target audience experience of the communication itself. So when the communication content is not delivered as specified. So we did a great job. We know exactly what really matters to the target audience. The communication plan is well done, but the delivery is poor. So there are many reasons why this can happen. Resource constraints or insufficient skill set of those who deliver the content. Or there are also intangible factors like, for instance, late delivery of content. When you talk to media agencies, they deliver late. There is a long value chain around this delivery of communication planning, of communications. But this can result in a quality gap. How to close gap 3? I propose to go back to the pyramid of purposes of the organization. All organizations need a sense of direction, so they know where they are going, and they plan their activities accordingly. So the higher you go in the pyramid, you will see there is a broad purpose of the organization, and the closer you get to the base of the pyramid, it is then specific and immediate purposes. So you go down to objectives and targets, and this is about how you do things. The what is the goals, and the why is the most, I would say, intimate content of your purposes, which is the vision, where we will be in 5 years, for instance, and what we do, the mission, what we stand for, and what matters to us, the values. The vision, the mission and value statements can assist communication between the organization and the main stakeholders, and stakeholders can be external, of course, but also internal. So we're talking about suppliers, collaborators, customers, and the public. And to all these people, we need to tell what our purpose is. And this, for me, is a powerful way to manage our voice, to avoid sending out mixed signals. And this is where the communication manager really has to work with a number of other internal stakeholders and departments with a view to ensure consistency with the mission and the vision of the company and the values. Sometimes, as communication managers, we find out that there is a big problem in the very core of the company purposes. We don't know clearly what our mission is. We don't really have a vision, or we don't even have a clear understanding of how we perform our activities every day, the values. And interestingly enough, a few weeks ago, in Eurostat, which is one of the statistical office of the European Community, the European Commission, a meeting took place. Senior managers sat down to try and come up with a new set of values and the mission and the vision. They agreed on the values. They agreed on the mission after a number of internal surveys with the staff. But interestingly enough, they couldn't manage to come up with a vision, which sounds quite alarming to me. But this is just to show how challenging can be reframing the purposes of the company. And communication managers have a great role to play. So my toolbox here is to assess what you have and assess against the expectations of external stakeholders, your target audience. And as you see here, the best communication managers are effective change agents. Now, this is not a webinar about change management. Perhaps Janet would like to organize something along these lines.
We have actually had the last couple of webinars have been along the lines of change management, Carlo, so I think we've covered the subject well.
Great, Janet. So I just missed that once, but I will just limit myself to give this 6-step model for change. But of course, you covered the topic in other webinars. So just my message here is: don't be afraid, don't be shy, as in your capacity as communication managers, to think of yourselves as change agents as well. An example, a practical example I want to give you is the rethinking of the vision, mission, and values of Iveco, and this dates back to 2008 now. This is the result of a lot of internal effort, but involving external stakeholders as well. And the role of my department, of the communication department, was to steer the process in a way that external stakeholders are taken into account, their perception and their expectations. Avoid that this becomes just an exercise of senior management, which will probably result in one of the quality gaps we are talking about. And there was a cultural challenge which is common to all multinational companies, when you have then to translate the mission, vision, and values for different markets, different cultural contexts. And then there is not the issue with translating this. It is not just the technical translation into a different language, but this translation has to take into account the cultural peculiarities of each specific context. And the fourth communication gap is when the target is between the target audience experience of the communication and their expectations on what we communicate. When the communication does not fulfill what the company is expected to deliver in terms of content, and how this might happen. Because what we deliver simply does not meet the standards set up by our company reputation or the tradition of communication established over the years. So it is kind of the need of keeping consistency over time in what we say. And there is a little bit of a paradox here, because we have to change according to the change in the external environment, as we have seen. But in the meantime, we have to remain stable enough in order not to erratically wave around when we deliver our communication. How we can close this gap? Here I refer to corporate values and brand values. The difference is sometimes a little bit difficult to explain, but I like to think of corporate values as when we think of the organization as really a community of people, and brand values when we think of how the values are encapsulated in the product or in the service we deliver. How this community of people lives every day the values that they are supposed to walk every day. So the corporate values, of course, give a sense of direction to the organization, and are a great support to the communication, not only externally but also towards internal audience. And there is also this need for change, evolve, and make a difference in comparison with the competitors. Brand values is what is included in the products and service of the organization. Through the products and service, you see the essence, the real essence of the organization of this community of people that do things. And back to the Iveco example, these four values is what we communicated to the external stakeholders, and then we tried to explain the meaning of each of these words in context. And the explanation was primarily targeted to internal stakeholders, internal audience, so the dealers and the employees. And for those who worked in the company, these sentences made sense because there are a lot of references to their daily work. You will probably not see them because, of course, you are not in that context. But again, this is like the sender message channel and receiver model. The message that you can see here, you cannot completely construct in your mind because it makes sense to those who work in the company or worked in the company at the time. But for the purposes of the communication manager, this is what we needed. we needed a message for the external stakeholders, and then we give a deeper message to the internal stakeholders so that they can get a sense of direction in what they do every day and the way they communicate themselves to the external stakeholders. And if we are successful in doing that, we will be able to use far audiences to influence the near environment. We establish a virtuous circle where the focus is on near audiences, but because of these values that permeate the activities of the near environment, we are able to influence the far environment, which in turn has a positive effect of the near environment and even internal environment as well. And this is then linked with staff motivation and company pride. So in terms of, now we see how we can really start building our communication plan and how we can fill our communication plan with content. We secure consistent conformance of the communication plans to the corporate and brand values. And here I used on purpose a definition to secure consistent conformance of the communication plan to something, which is the definition of quality. So here we align the communication plan to the brand values. And we should possibly also set up mechanisms for which the effectiveness of what we do is measured and becomes an evaluation tool for management. So basically, typically, you incorporate performance indicators in their yearly objectives. And here is what happened in the Communication Plan 2008, where we started from the new vision, mission, and values, and then we decided what were the objectives of our communication plan, and we established 3 main objectives. And we coupled these 3 objectives with a number of activities which were in our communication plan, and then we could very easily link each activity to the overall aims of the communication plan. And then, of course, then you deliver your communication, you deliver the activities, and you measure. And you keep using the double loop feedback to keep measuring not only how good you are, but how good your performance indicators are as well, as we saw in one of the quality gaps. The toolbox to do this. It is absolutely crucial that the communication managers keep a cross-boundary approach, not only within the company, but also across all markets and audiences. Being consistent does not mean that you say exactly the same thing in exactly the same way everywhere. We have seen that because we have to ensure that the target audience will make sense of that the message gets through. Brand values give a message not only to customers but also to employees. The brand values we're talking about provide kind of a glue to an organization and enable staff to understand how they should behave with the external stakeholders, and by understanding the brand values, employees are more likely to reflect these values in the interaction with the customer, and they become more credible ambassadors to the external public. And here is where you can even think of having full-time communicators in your company, which is the communication department or the press office, HR, whatever, but also you have part-time communicators, and these part-time communicators are all staff. Everybody is a communicator in the company. To do this, you have to also to secure support by the top management, and you can very well start with a limited number of forerunners, but at some point you need to have all the employees catch up with this. When I joined Iveco, I remember there were two different mentalities there. One was, we are the best, and we don't care about competitors. Whatever we do, we are the best, which is very dangerous. And the other was, the other extreme, we are the worst. Whatever we do, we will never catch up with Mercedes or Scania or our best competitors, which is also very dangerous. When you establish these champions in the company who start believing in the new brand values, you have to, at some point, you will see that everybody will start embracing the new ambassadorial role, and this is what happened several times in my career. I see this happening. It is worth to believe. Gap 5 is when the target audience has an experience on the communication, but what they get is not what really matters to them, even if all other gaps are closed. Here we have to remember that what really matters to the target audience is determined by their perceptions, and not the perceptions of the company communication managers. Here, to close this gap, it is absolutely crucial that we, as communication manager, see things from the target audience standpoint. So the whole point is that things change, and what we deliver in terms of communication could not be what they expect to get at that moment. To close this gap, I suggest to think of the market-led organization. The market-led approach to communication is driven by what really matters to the target audience. Once again, the purpose is to pick up clues or signals. It is easy to miss even strong signals if management is focused on internal issues. But if we fail in responding to strong signals, this can be very costly to the organization. And things change. Target audience change their preferences, their expectations. We simply don't get it. We miss it. It's very difficult, because if we fail in responding, this will be very costly. If we understand these strong signals, anyway, we are not creating any competitive advantage for the organization, because strong signals, everybody is able to see them. So these signals are widely recognized. Organization will tend to respond in the same way. Communication managers will start doing more or less the same things, and this often results in the phenomenon of shoaling, when a host of independent organizations all move to the same direction. And here is, we set a trend in communication. You see trends in communication, in content and the way communication is delivered. So, a key objective of the market-led approach must be to pick up the weak signals. The weak signals can lead to competitive advantage, because we understand what really matters, and what is more important. We can understand what is going to matter to the target audience. Just just 1 second before it happens, we already know what is going to matter. Of course, this is hard to see, the pattern of weak signals, because they are frequently hidden in background noise. Another aspect of this market-led organization is this interfunctional coordination. The point here is to avoid or get rid of compartmentalized thinking across the organization. And we need, as communication managers, to help coordinating the efforts cross-boundary in order to achieve this holistic approach I mentioned before and speak to the target audience consistently. And this is the realm of integrated corporate communication across boundaries. And we need this integrated approach because we try as communication managers to reflect the reality of the experience of the target audience. In other words, we need to structure communication around the customer. We need to understand their way of making sense of what we communicate. And the toolbox here, we have to search for trends in target audience expectations and needs, which is, as we said, it is when the trend is established, it's already too late. We should try to find out when it is going to happen, not just when it already happened. Have a look at our competitors and see what they do in terms of communication, what is their strategy, even if they are not direct competitors, but if we can benchmark in a way. And remember, established cross-department work is of the essence to be consistent to what our target audience expect. It can be an exhausting task because we need sometimes to secure the support of senior management, establishing cross-boundary working groups or actions. It is for sure harder than working just inside our department, but I think it is definitely worthwhile. So this was my proposition to close the 5 quality gaps, but I would like to leave you with the message that I promised you in the beginning. The communication manager does not just practice communication planning and content. The communication manager has to work together with a number of other functions in the company. And so we don't just practice communication. We practice a bit of everything. Thank you very much. I think I managed to stay in my time limit. Janet?
You did, Carlo. Thank you. Yes. I'd just like to say thank you very much for doing that great sort of overview of strategy. And I must admit, some of your messages hit home with me because you're probably not aware, but everyone who's attending today knows that I'm using Eventbrite to send out, to take registrations and messages. But one of the things, rather frustratingly, I found is that when I use Eventbrite to send a message with the link to these webinars, for some reason it corrupts it. So I think technology is also, it's a bit like your Romanian email. Was it Romanian, you said?
It was Bulgarian, actually.
Bulgarian, sorry. There you go, my communications failed. Yes, so that's sort of immediately a problem. So, it really is all about the way you sort of communicate, isn't it, and what you communicate. Tim has said, great content and concise presentation, thank you. Could we see the previous slide again? So I don't know if you can click back, Carlo. There you go.
This one?
Yes, yes. Tim, we will be sending out the slides, so you will have a chance to look at them in detail later. So, Okay, well, we don't seem to have got any other questions coming in, I don't think. So I think I'll just leave it to say thank you, everybody, for joining. I do realise there are a few issues in the link that I sent out, and I shall be communicating that to everybody that, you know, that was a problem. I apologise. And I'd just like to say good night to everyone, and thank you, Carlo.
Bye-bye.
Bye.